Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Seems perfect. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time at CIDOC, so that's very exciting. And also, it's great to be here in the lovely and sunny Tallinn. So my name is Rasa Bocyte. I'm a researcher at the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision. And today, indeed, I will be presenting on behalf of a European research and innovation project called inDICEs, or whichever way you want to pronounce it. We use at least 5 different pronunciations, and we still, after 2 years of the project, we still have not agreed on the right way to pronounce it. And what I will be talking about in this presentation is the self-assessment and data monitoring strategies to support museums and also other cultural heritage organizations through the digital transformations or the digital transitions. There we go. So the project was born out of one very concrete problem that we had at hand. We've seen that there has been a lot of investment made in over the last decades in the digitization of cultural heritage collections and also in building the digital capacity of the sector. But so far we are still lacking comprehensive data that would actually show whether kind of these investments led to the intended impacts and whether they fully unleashed the potential of digital heritage collections. So the research question that has been guiding our work is: how can cultural heritage organizations assess, demonstrate, and increase the impact of digital cultural heritage collections? And I think this is a very nice transition from the previous presentation and the last question about impact, because I think it's very important to position impact within kind of the changing role of cultural heritage organizations that we are seeing at the moment. And obviously this is very much present in the discussions about the new definition of museum that is happening at ICOM. And the way we try to position it within the inDICEs project is by looking through the lens of 3 regimes of cultural production. And this is a framework that has been developed by Pierluigi Sacco. And in this framework, we identify three different regimes of cultural participation and production. The first one is Culture 1.0, or the Patronage Regime. And this is a regime where we see cultural organizations acting as knowledge experts and knowledge keepers who actually are the ones that sanction what we define as culture and who gets to access culture, almost creating this kind of elitist and kind of sacred aura around heritage collections. And this is very much embedded in kind of the historic role of museums in the 19th century. Now, when we look at the changes that happened through the Industrial Revolution, we see a shift towards Culture 2.0, where culture is much more embedded in creative industries and the industrialization, making culture much more available to the wider masses and turning us basically into the consumers of culture. And here I think a very interesting shift is that we're seeing that the definition of culture is defined by the forces of the market and by us as the consumers of this culture, and primarily the kind of the majority, the most dominant voices. And what we are actually seeing in more recent years is signals of Culture 3.0. And this is a relatively new development that we are seeing and we're still learning about. And largely it is defined by the emergence of internet technologies that have enabled really different ways for citizens and for different stakeholders to actually interact with each other and participate in cultural production and participation processes. And one very important element of this is that everyone can become the producer of culture, everyone can become an influencer. And these barriers between what we used to have in Culture 1.0, between the, let's say, the knowledge keepers and the consumers are actually completely blurring and disappearing. And this is where we actually see a lot of potential for digital cultural heritage collections, because they can really facilitate this cultural participation and interaction that's happening on the digital platforms. And obviously, this Culture 3.0 can be a really strong stimulus to kind of the participatory, democratic, and civic processes. So there's a lot of positive impact that can be gained from Culture 3.0. And in our research, we are trying to understand exactly what heritage organizations and society at large can gain from this Culture 3.0. And in our research, we have identified 8 areas of impact associated with this regime that cover benefits that would directly benefit the individuals, society at large, economy, and democracy. And I wouldn't say that these impacts are necessarily unique to this particular regime. I think some of these benefits can definitely be achieved through the other 2 regimes as well. But what we're seeing here with the emergence of the digital is actually kind of that the scale and acceleration of this impact can really be scaled up. So for instance, in the previous presentation, we talked a lot about the learning society. My favorite one is probably collective identity, and I'm glad that Jill is in the room, because when I was thinking of this slide, I was thinking about the great work that she's doing with communities and crowdsourcing and crowdfunding activities to actually enable the voices of the community to emerge. And this is really kind of a new perspective of allowing audiences to become participants in defining what culture is and being recognized as the experts rather than the consumers. So there's a number of examples that we can think of associated with these impact areas, and I think while we already kind of see what can we achieve, we're still trying to learn how we can fully benefit and achieve these impacts. And what we are trying to do in the project is to really understand what steps we need to take as cultural heritage organizations to achieve this vision of Culture 3.0 impacts. So to address this dilemma, we developed 3 hypotheses that have been guiding our project related to analysis of Culture 3.0, participatory processes, and self-assessment. And don't worry about reading these at the moment. I will go into detail a bit later. What I just wanted to say that for each hypothesis in the project, we actually developed different tools and methods and strategies to address them. I'm not a good salesperson. I'm not going to pitch them to you. What I actually prefer doing is problematizing things and kind of complicating the conversation. So probably I'm going to try to speak a bit more about what we actually learned through the process, what things worked, what didn't work, and leave you with more questions than answers. So get ready for that. So the first hypothesis that we entered with focuses on the analysis of Culture 3.0 as a process through which cultural organizations can increase the impact of digital cultural heritage. And specifically, we wanted to look at existing Culture 3.0 practices in the field and seeing whether we can actually learn from them and translate them to engagement with digital cultural heritage. So looking at what's already existing in other fields and taking those learnings into our practices. So here I have to give a lot of credit to our partners, Fondazione Bruno Kessler, a university in Italy, who have been doing most of this work. And over the last 2 years, they have been basically looking at these digital spaces that are known for their, let's say, the flourishing culture 3.0 participation of cultural engagement. So they've been gathering data from platforms like Twitter, TikTok, IMDb, Twitch, Wikipedia, DeviantArt. And we've been looking at data from these platforms to understand how users of these platforms actually engage with content creation, how they engage with one another, how they edit the content, how they create, what are the characteristics of this engagement. And spoiler alert, we actually didn't find these flourishing culture 3.0 activities on these platforms. So I'm going to share just a few highlights from our research, and I say our research, but it's mostly the research of our university partners. So when we looked at Wikipedia, we kind of really expected to see the signals of community co-creation happening in the processes of knowledge publication on Wikipedia. And actually in this graph that you can see here, what it shows is that there's only a very small number of contributors who are returning contributors and who are the ones contributing most of the content on Wikipedia. So it's just this, the tiniest, very, very red dot. These are, let's say, the expert users, the hardcore group of Wikipedia entry editors, and then the rest of the consumers are, let's say, not consumers, sorry, the editors are probably the ones who are returning once or twice. So they're not really fully engaging or benefiting from this co-creation. And for better or for worse, basically what we're seeing is that there's still this core elite group of knowledge creators, and then more of a kind of the lurkers or the consumers of this content. What we also expected to see with Culture 3.0 is that there should be a more, let's say, equal or just distribution of revenue for content creators. So for this, we looked at Twitch platform. And as you can see, this is also what turned out to be a very traditional graph. So here at the very top, what we can see is that most of the revenue goes to a very small number of creators, while the rest, kind of the majority of the content creators on Twitch are not seeing the same benefits. So again, this equality between the creators and the participants in these platforms is not really fulfilled. And what we also did is looked at how cultural heritage organizations themselves are using these digital platforms that supposedly offer the benefits of Culture 3.0. So we've been gathering data from Facebook and Instagram, looking at the accounts of a number of European libraries, museums, archives, archaeological sites, and more. And we've been gathering this data during kind of the peak period of COVID in 2020. And we definitely saw a massive increase in the usage of these platforms by heritage organizations, which corresponded with the number of followers that they gained. So that was positive. But at the same time, the interaction with the content was massively decreasing. You can see this really, really dramatic arrow here to actually point to that, which kind of points to the fact that just the mere existence of these platforms and the publication of content doesn't immediately translate to this vision of Culture 3.0, where we are benefiting from these from this participatory engagement. And what you might have picked up on is that in all of these analyses, we looked at commercial platforms, which have really been leading the way in kind of defining this participatory culture. I hope that we still have an opportunity in the project to look at, let's say, more grassroots platforms initiated by communities, open source solutions, and see whether that differs there. I think it would be quite interesting to compare those results. But one main takeaway that we took from this is that this is an opportunity for cultural heritage organizations to actually foster more participatory behaviors. And to do so, we don't only need to, let's say, teach and educate the public, but we also need to adopt those practices ourselves. Because if we need to implement it, we also need to understand it ourselves, how it works. And this is where our second hypothesis comes in. And it proposes participatory processes for cultural organizations, so between the cultural heritage professionals, as a way to increase the impact of the sector. And specifically, we set out to build a platform that would enable cultural heritage professionals to engage in these participatory deliberation and co-creation processes and discussions, and give them tools to come together, to work together, to build networks in a sustainable way that would actually keep them alive, and to produce data through these discussions that would actually support the sector. And in the project, we have a really great partner based in Spain, Platonique, who have been working with Decidim, which is open source technology, specifically designed to facilitate democratic deliberation processes, and they built our platform based on this technology. And you might be familiar with this platform already. It's been used across a number of municipalities in Europe. And also, if you engaged with European Commission's conference on the future of Europe, it was also used there to really great success, actually, to kind of crowdsource input from all of the citizens across Europe, as you can see in a number of different languages, to gather ideas for future European Union policies. So this is just an example of the way we use our platform, and we've been using it throughout the project to guide our research activities. So we actually engage in these what we called assemblies to gather ideas and propose topics that we would actually use for our research activities. Also, we are in the process of developing some policy recommendations. So again, we kind of crowdsource in these bottom-up processes ideas for these recommendations. And I wish I could stand here and tell you that it's working to a great success. We definitely see a lot of benefits of this, but it's a difficult process to change the mindset of how we work and adopt these type of activities. Usually the answer that we get is, why don't we just use Google Docs? I can just add comments and that's it. So it's an extra effort, and it's a skill that you have to actually acquire and foster. So this is just a starting point, and we do hope that this platform is going to live on. We're hoping to see Europeana network using it. We see a great benefit for networks like Europeana and ICOM or NEMO to adopt these platforms to make their decision-making processes more transparent, so you could actually kind of, in bottom-up ways, crowdsource ideas from your network members on your strategy, on your priorities, on the capacity building needs. So there's a lot of potential, but there's still quite a way for us to get there, to actually benefit from this. Which brings me to my final hypothesis, which has to do with self-assessment as a strategy to enable cultural heritage organizations to monitor their impact and performance, and use this data to increase this impact, and also identify what kind of expertises, skills, and actions they need to implement to advance their efforts also towards achieving this Culture 3.0 vision. Can I just ask in the room how many of you are familiar with self-assessment for heritage organizations? Just a raise of hands. Okay, yeah. It's been a bit of a buzzword, so I wasn't sure if I need to kind of give the whole laydown of what it is. But in very simple terms, usually what self-assessment is just a list of questions that you within an organization can fill out to benchmark where you are against your goals. And use these questions basically to guide you in your next steps, where you're going to go next to actually achieve those targets, and prioritize what you want to do. And the way I envision self-assessment is specifically in the circular fashion. So it's not just a survey that you complete once. You actually need to collect data again and again and again to compare it and to see whether your actions are actually going in the right direction, whether the decisions that you have made based on the data that you gathered are leading to more impact. And this can be done on an individual level within an organization. So let's say we have a museum completing the self-assessment, and they use this data to talk with the senior management, who can then make the decisions within an organization, let's say about capacity building or standardization within an organization. And those decisions can be measured then again at a later stage to see whether those goals were achieved. And then again, we have this data, and then we can see whether those decisions actually achieve their impact, or we need to implement something else. At the same time, this can also work on an aggregated level. So if we can gather self-assessment data from a number of heritage organizations at a large scale, at the European level, at the regional level, we can collect this data to inform decisions more on a, let's say, the strategy on a higher level in terms of policy, nationally or on a European level, funding schemes, and these sorts of decisions. And again, this is a cyclical process. And in terms of what data is being collected through self-assessment, it actually varies. There are different tools to support this, and each tool and each strategy offers different focus. It can include everything from digitization practices, documentation standards, to, let's say, more organizational activities such as HR, financing, ICT, etc. So for those of you who are not familiar with the self-assessment strategies, I just wanted to show here a few tools for self-assessment. My favorite one is the Digital Culture Compass. There's also commercially developed solutions by Microsoft that you can try. And if you haven't tried self-assessment tools, I would definitely recommend. It's just a very... It's simple, yet it's complex. It asks you often very simple questions, but just the act of asking those questions often helps you identify knowledge gaps or priorities and kind of kick people into action to actually address those. So we actually, when we conceptualized our project, which was about 4 years ago, we also proposed to create a self-assessment tool, which is still in the works, and since then we've seen all of these other self-assessment tools that have emerged. But what we are doing at the moment is actually embedding some of those ideas about self-assessment and also Culture 3.0 in ongoing self-assessment activities in the sector, and specifically in the Enumerate survey that is conducted by Europeana. So for those of you who might not be familiar with this, it's a biannual survey that has been conducted since 2012, I have a feeling, 2014, something around that. And it's collecting data on digitization strategies and also on the accessibility of digital cultural heritage across Europeana network and beyond. So fingers crossed everything works, and actually we're going to be releasing the new version of Enumerate tomorrow, and I'm very excited that we actually were able to incorporate some of the questions related to Culture 3.0, to more digital business models and strategies into the survey, to raise awareness within cultural heritage organizations that these are the topics that are really the priorities for us, and also when aggregated, when this data will be aggregated and reported back to the European Commission, we also want the policy level to be aware of this. So now that there are so many different self-assessment strategies available, I think one of the main kind of takeaways that I wanted to leave you with is how to actually make sure that your organization benefits from this. And first off, I think it's very important that self-assessment is actually embedded within the organizational processes, and that you actually have workflows in place to collect data that you will need for self-assessment in a way that you can actually compare this data again and again, so that you actually kind of have a way to collect it in a scalable and iterative way. And also, once you're going to try these self-assessment tools, you'll see that they're very long and extensive, which is a bit tricky, because there's not a single person within a cultural heritage organization who's going to have all of those answers. And you should not expect someone to be like that. Probably the best way to actually do this is to gather people in the room and make this really a collaborative process where you actually are able to identify these different expertises and knowledge that you need for the self-assessment. And also, I would encourage you to critically engage with what the self-assessment technologies and tools are offering, and specifically what questions they are asking, and also, more importantly, what they're not asking about. When I was testing all of these self-assessment tools, I was really missing focus on environmental sustainability. This is something that not many tools are asking about, or also about the well-being of staff that are working at cultural heritage organizations. And these are definitely priorities for me and my organization, and I hope it's the same for yours. So we definitely need to find ways to also fill those gaps, and maybe we need to create different workflows and data collection activities to actually make visible that these are the priorities for us, so we can communicate this externally as well. And finally, and probably the most important aspect, is that we need to make use of this data that is being collected. And I think data is such a powerful instrument. It also can be a very visual instrument that we can communicate to inform decisions, and also to inform the image that we create about the cultural heritage sector to those who are perceiving us externally. And also use it as a tool to give more agency to cultural organizations to make steps forward towards the digital transformation, and also towards the Culture 3.0. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we do have workshop. The questions can be entered here. But if you do want to ask any questions, then please, Truyen, give them the microphone, because we have online listeners. So that's, yes. I have a copy of here as well.
Can I have a glass of water?
Yes. Oh, wait. You can answer the question. I will give you the water. Yes.
Teamwork.
Hello. Hi, Rasa, thank you very much for this presentation. I really enjoyed hearing some of the developments of inDICEs project. I have a couple of more technical questions, methodological questions, and I'm not sure, well, I hope to hear your perspective on this. So you presented some graphs on the analysis of Wikipedia users, editors, and I was just wondering if you were able to sort of isolate the behavior of the editors for cultural-related pages, or if there's anything on that, or if you're just looking at general or 3.0. I have then a follow-up question regarding the other graph you show on the heritage institutions. Okay, thank you. On the heritage
That's going to make it easier.
Yeah, this is on the editors, but on this one, on the heritage institutions social media, you show these peaks and you show the dramatic reduction of engagement by the audience. My question is, in terms of the quality of the content consumers had the chance to engage with, is there any analysis on the posts being produced? Because I suspect that there's a lot of communication, aka noise, just being present. And however, we have the notion that the younger generations are quite sharp about the quality of the content, and they want good stuff because there's just so much, and they're extremely sharp in filtering this. And so I wonder if there's any indication of a quality of the communication by these institutions to show actual content. In the slide you shown, the definition of the 3.0 is very much about engagement to co-create. It's difficult to co-create on a given communication. It's much easier to co-create when you get these sort of Lego pieces which are at the core of heritage institutions, which is the content of the collections. Is there any chance that you can isolate those? And so, going with this quality of the content, I guess the follow-up, third and last question will be...
Do you remember the starting point?
Oh dear.
Shall I answer the first two questions before I forget?
Sure.
Yeah, and then I'm sure we're going to have time for more. So, where was this? The... No, this is... No, I did something. Anyway, I was going to answer the question about the Wikipedia. There we go. I wish we had considered this in terms of specifically isolating the cultural heritage related sites, because we have not done that. We literally just downloaded the bulk of Wikipedia. I don't remember how many terabytes of it. It was a massive amount, but we just looked at the aggregated data. But I would actually love to do this as a follow-up step, kind of isolate whether there's differences in engagement and whether cultural audiences are maybe more prone to cultural interaction and engagement and production. So this would be a very interesting topic to discuss with you also, and maybe together we can define those categories of what it is that we want to look at. In terms of content, again, a very good point. At the moment, what we did is we didn't differentiate the posts that we looked at. It was just, I don't remember exactly what was the period. I think the half a year of cultural, of posts that were created during this period, and we did not differentiate whether it was just, let's say, the communication about the hours, the opening hours of the museum, or the actual content. But the way we selected the accounts that were analyzed is that we were specifically looking for organizations that were using these digital channels to share digital heritage collections. So it was very purposeful in that way. But that would be, again, a follow-up for us to kind of break this down a bit more. But what we actually kind of noticed is that in terms of quality, there's a long way to go. We're competing in a massive market where our audiences, they're consuming so much content, and for them to kind of interact with the content that we are providing, it needs to be extremely high quality, and to be fair, we don't really have the resources to do that, but this is where I think the self-assessment comes in, and that's why we're asking questions about the social media and about marketing and communication skills that organizations have or might not have to actually at least boost the interaction rate a bit more.
Okay, thank you very much. Some of my students have done analysis on the social media posts of major museums in the Netherlands, including Rijksmuseums, Van Gogh, and Stedelijk, which are the top 3 in Amsterdam. And they have found that in the sort of Corona period, the number of images of collections were extremely limited. And they're just reposting the same images. So if this is done by the major organizations, my students did analysis at their level, which is nothing compared with the resources you have in inDICEs. So I would really appreciate if you could, do a little bit more thorough analysis, like for instance, just capturing images. And later on you can filter if this is art or not art, but something like that will give, I think, a much richer, really understanding of what's going on. And then my third and last question was actually in terms of your definition. You presented, as proposed with Pierre-Louis Jusaco and team, which is about the culture of 3.0. And one of the main points there is regarding social well-being and inclusion and so on, prosumer ecosystems, and so on. And so this is very much from the consumer perspective. And so my question will be, are there any data being gathered to sort of try to profile who these cultural participant in, digital cultural heritage participant might be online? Because we have indications that very much there's a digital divide, but this cultural divide remains. And so I wonder if this cultural 3.0 is actually a profile for the higher educated, highly cultural activists and so on that remain, the smaller and will sort of be a reduced segment of the population. So I was curious if you have an indication of this. Thank you.
I have an opinion about this, which is that, as you just said about the Rijksmuseum and Van Gogh and other massive organizations you would expect to be on Culture 3.0, actually what we're seeing is that that's not necessarily the case. And the lovely museum that we visited yesterday, that was the perfect example of Culture 3.0. And they probably don't even have let's say Twitter or TikTok, and that doesn't matter. And I think when we think of Culture 3.0, it is digital technologies, but also this digital mindset that we have, also about networking and bringing people together that we did not think was possible before. So translating also this digital thinking into kind of the non-digital practices, I think it's also very important. And in most cases, I think it's the smaller organizations who are connected to their communities. They're the ones who are leading the way in Culture 3.0, and they are the ones who are going to be showing us examples of how it works. It's just that we need to start learning from them and also see how we can translate these insights into larger organizations who are serving much broader audiences. So this is also, like I said, we're still learning all about this, and this is very new, so it's a very exciting field, and I think that's everything. I hope that answers your question.
Very well. Very good answer. Do you have a question? No? I have some here as well. Yeah. So, well, impact is a difficult thing to understand. Here, I think we rather understand the interaction. We understand who uses the tools and the places we offer and all the possibilities. But what kind of data you consider actually useful to understand impact when you have changed somebody's life or made a real difference?
Yeah, we kind of are in the process of developing a set of new indicators on this, and we kind of draw experience from the Europeana impact framework, if some of you are familiar, which is more of a qualitative way to measure impact. And I think in most cases, when we look at these 8 impact areas, the most powerful way to capture impact will be through qualitative ways, through storytelling, through capturing the stories of the people who have experienced these changes in their lives due to culture. But I think, obviously, this type of data collection takes a lot of time and resources.
Sometimes it's impossible.
Exactly, yeah. But the way, it's kind of a bit of a catch-42, that you have to invest in these impact activities to gather data that you can actually then prove that you should be investing more resources and that you are actually creating a lot of value to the economy and the society through what you are doing.
Well, also, Saku, I think, has mentioned also culture 4.0. Or is it anything to consider yet?
I think we're still learning what to do with culture 3.0, so that's going to be the next frontier.
I'm done with my questions here. Jill, do you have a question? You are forced now.
Well, I mean, I agree with everything you said before about the culture 3.0, and it's preaching to the converted. I mean, it really, we're not getting outside the people who are using culture in the first place. And I think that's also true on most of the platforms, the people who are following it. So how you do that, I think, has got to be the next thing that museums move into. I don't actually have the answer. I do think it's easier in a smaller organisation. So, for instance, all our TikTok is done by kids. They come in, they do more or less what they like. We check it's not rude, and then that's it. That's as far as we go with it, and that gets engagement.
Yeah.
I'm always frustrated by the fact engagement comes from, if I put Limerick, which is where the museum is, I'll get engagement, and it doesn't almost matter what the content is, which I think is also quite interesting, what psychology you are going to there. But anyway, my question was more around, is it Decidim? What's the platform called?
Yes, Decidim.
I would love to use this, but it requires too much time and too much effort. And I think the thing that needs to go back to them is, how can you literally end up with the 3 questions that you want somebody to answer, and that's all they're putting in. And I know that's difficult. I don't, again, have the answer to it, but I know at least you'll get something there.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we're falling down. I just wondered if you knew if they got any plans to go down a more user-friendly interface for it.
Yeah, definitely. And this is what we have been trying to go towards, because also if you look at the platform, they use a certain methodology and terminologies that we're not necessarily familiar with or used to in our workflows. So this is also something that we want to make sure that it's a bit more accessible in that sense for us. And there are definitely tools to make data collection and these activities in a very simple way. You can do surveys, you can do just a 1-sentence proposal, and you can also do upvoting, downvoting. So actually what we usually do is that we create proposals from our research, and then we ask people to react on them. So you can give a thumbs up, thumbs down, and if you have something to say, then you can add a comment. Surprisingly, the biggest barrier has been the registration. People don't want to register. People don't want to create yet another account on yet another platform that they're going to forget the password of. And this is, it's such a simple thing, but I understand that it's also annoying. But at the same time, if we want to stimulate this returning engagement and community building, we have to have these sort of infrastructures for identifying people and making sure that they can join different activities that are ongoing and keep them informed about what's happening. But this is also something that we've been coming back and forth how to do this. There's no easy way, and for us, the solution that we have been working towards ideally is that this is going to become part of the Europeana DSI that is actually going to be connected to the Europeana Pro platform. And Europeana has already been thinking about introducing some sort of a login or registration. So this would not add an extra element of complexity, but kind of go in the same direction that they were going. But I understand that this is also still.
I hope they don't.
Yeah, yeah.
Some analysis which might be interesting on the interactions during COVID on online, which was it really came down to the ones that worked are the ones with content in them. If you wanted an interaction, so every time if you want interaction, but of course as museums or whatever, you also want to promote what you're doing, and that's fine because you're doing it to engage people to come to something. They don't have to do anything with it, but they've seen it. So I think it depends what you're using it for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and since you both mentioned example of this, we're trying to kind of collect all of these resources and researches that have been done around these topics. So please reach out to me and to our team, and we can also try to see whether we can also present these results on this platform and make them accessible. So that would be for me a really great outcome of this conversation.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for saving the day to being in here.
Thank you.